That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
All right, guys, I know we have gotten so many questions for us to make this video. I've been talking to people on Patreon for pretty much a week about these two prospects, and that is because they are out of this world. I mean, there is so much to get excited about here. I don't know if I want to go out on a limb and say they're going to be better than Justin Jefferson or anything of that stretch. But yeah, there is a ton of talent, so there is a ton of excitement. But before we get into the video, I want to thank everybody so much for the support that y'all been showing as of late. I mean, y'all are making this by far and away the fastest growing Dynasty Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. And the way y'all are doing that is by dropping likes, leaving comments, subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications next to that subscribe button. That way y'all get notified whenever we go live. That way y'all can hop in a mock draft with us. Y'all can go up against me. But yeah, quick side note as well. I know this is something that I need to do better at explaining. But guys, if you are playing in a Flock Dynasty League, league dues are due like right now. Please DM me on Patreon. Let's get that sorted out. There are so many new subscribers that are wanting in those Dynasty Leagues on Patreon. So yeah, there are people to take your spot, but I don't want them to. I want to be able to start new leagues with new people, and I want those current leagues to be going with the same guys. So please get your league dues in ASAP. I've been trying to collect them for a few weeks now, but this is like the hardest part of my job of running all of these leagues is collecting league dues. But anyway, that's enough. Let's dive into this video and let's talk about Jamar Chase versus Devonta Smith. And I will get this right out the way. I will say that I know this offseason is really going to come down to film versus analytics for Devonta Smith versus Jamar Chase. If you're an analytics guy, you're going to be going Jamar Chase, market share, breakout age. I really want Jamar Chase on my roster. If you're a film guy, you're going to be looking at Devonta Smith and go, God damn, those routes are looking solid. I mean, Devonta Smith was able to dominate at the highest level of football with Alabama. And yeah, I mean, there's so much to get excited about here. Let's break down Devonta Smith first, and then we'll dive into Jamar Chase. And Devonta Smith was a 4 or 5-star guy. I mean, coming out of high school, already a very solid athlete, running a sub 4.5 40. Obviously, those reported 40-yard dashes are extremely hard to rely on. I'm really hoping that we actually get an NFL Combine this offseason, that we have official numbers. But I'll say this to be completely frank. I mean, with these wide receivers, it's completely different than running back. Y'all know when I was talking about Najee Harris, when I was talking about Travis Etienne, specifically in the case of Najee Harris, the 40 time was going to be everything. I mean, I really needed to see a strong 40 time from Najee Harris because he ran a 4.66 going into Alabama. But at the wide receiver position, really, I could care less about your athletic profile. I could care less about your speed. Just because we know that the wide receivers that are generally the burners, the guys that are the Henry Ruggs type player, while they're extremely valuable for NFL offenses, they're not necessarily extremely valuable for fantasy because those elite level athletes at the wide receiver position generally are asked to stretch the field and aren't necessarily going to be logging a ridiculous amount of targets. Where Devonta Smith, I mean, he has enough athleticism where you don't have to worry about it at all. But the one glaring red flag on the Devonta Smith profile, actually, there's two. One is his size. I mean, he's 6'1", listed as 175 pounds. Now, if y'all aren't used to looking at these prospects coming into the NFL, generally what the school tells us is not true. I mean, they try to make the prospects sound as appealing as possible. Generally, they'll give him an extra inch on the height. They'll add a few pounds. With Devonta Smith, I mean, we want to see him weighing more than 175 pounds. I'm fine if he weighs 175 pounds and he's 5'10". I mean, but if you're 6'1", weighing 175 pounds, I mean, your BMI is low. I mean, that is scary. What happens when you're running across the field and get cracked by an NFL linebacker? The other glaring red flag is the fact that he actually stayed 4 years out of Alabama. Now, I'll say this is going to be a little bit of a controversial point just because Devonta Smith has a fantastic reason why he stayed 4 years at Alabama. We'll get into that later on in the video. Right? Actually, let's just dive into it. Let's dive into his Alabama career and what he was able to accomplish. And in 2017, his true freshman season, he was able to accomplish nothing. I mean, he averaged about 1 reception a game for about like 20 yards a game. But the reason behind this was he was playing behind a wide receiver. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley was the wide receiver one for Alabama that season. Then their wide receiver 2 was Jerry Jeudy. Don't know if you heard of him either, but he was a first-round selection, I believe, with the 15th overall pick by the Denver Broncos in 2020. And then their third wide receiver on the roster, not sure if you've heard of this guy, a little bit under the radar, but Henry Ruggs, the first wide receiver drafted in 2020 this past season. And then their fourth wide receiver on the roster was actually Robert Foster. Now, all jokes aside, I'm sure some of y'all don't know who Robert Foster is, but he actually played for the Buffalo Bills as an undrafted free agent. And in 2018, he had a very strong season. Actually, I'm sorry, maybe it was 2017. Regardless of the point, I mean, he reminds me a ton of a wide receiver like Gabriel Davis right now, probably just because it's the same team, so I'm an idiot and I just want to put 1 and 2 together. But a field stretching wide receiver that looked decent for a small stretch at the NFL level, so definitely an NFL caliber player. And he had 4 NFL wide receivers ahead of him, and he was a true freshman. So really can't expect too much from Devonta Smith. But his sophomore year, after Calvin Ridley leaves, we get a bump up in production where he's then able to go out there and average about 3.5 receptions a game, all the way up to 50 yards a game and 6 total touchdowns. So obviously this is a big difference, but he's still playing with a ton of NFL talent around him. And this is why it's so hard to evaluate a Devonta Smith profile here, because guys that had more receiving yards than him in 2018, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, Henry Ruggs, and Irv Smith Jr. Okay, so Jalen Waddle, we have not discussed him in this video so far, but he is coming out in the 2021 draft class alongside Devonta Smith, and he is going to be a player drafted in the top 2 rounds. He's definitely a quality NFL wide receiver, a little bit more of a speed guy, but regardless. And then Irv Smith, I'm sure y'all all know, Irv Smith Jr. is a tight end for the Minnesota Vikings, who's looked really good in his first 2 seasons for what a tight end is going to do at the NFL level in his first 2 seasons. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much talent around him. But let's just say after 2018, we get some of these players out of the way. I mean, Irv Smith is gone, so we see another bump up from Devonta Smith. We actually see him ahead of some... We actually see him ahead of some extremely strong wide receiver prospects. I mean, he was averaging over 5 receptions a game, close to 100 yards, and he had 14 total touchdowns. I mean, he was outproducing Jerry Jeudy. He was outproducing Henry Ruggs. He was outproducing Jalen Waddle. And I mean, honestly, if we were going to be completely frank, I mean, in 2020, around the NFL draft, not too many people were talking about Devonta Smith. I mean, yeah, he was a guy that people wanted in Devy leagues, but people weren't talking about him being better than Jerry Jeudy. People weren't talking about him being better than Henry Ruggs. At least not in my circle of Dynasty Fantasy Football. They weren't. Maybe we are all just idiots. But I mean, Devonta Smith goes back to Alabama in 2021 after Jerry Jeudy, after Henry Ruggs leave. And then it's just him and Jalen Waddle, and he becomes a man. I mean, in 2021, as the clear alpha on the team, with Jalen Waddle only playing in 3 games, I mean, he averaged 9 receptions a game, almost 150 receiving yards in the SEC, and had over 20 total touchdowns. I mean, what more would you want to see? I mean, clearly, he is not going to be popping in breakout age just because he had so much quality talent around him. Clearly, he's not going to be popping in dominator rating until his very last season at Alabama, where, yes, I understand he's a little bit of an older wide receiver prospect, which you don't like to see with historical hit rates, but this is a different situation. So please, guys, be excited about Devonta Smith. I'm honestly more worried about the size than I am with the breakout age and with the fact that he stayed 4 years at Alabama, because I know a lot of people in the metrics community are going to be hyper-focusing in on those 2 things and not really wanting to understand the context around it. Devonta Smith, an elite level prospect coming into the NFL. Extremely excited about him. But let's go over to Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase, on the other hand, oh my gosh. Okay, Jamar Chase right now is a metric darling. 20 years old. We love to see the wide receivers coming into the NFL at that young of an age. Obviously, we're not too excited in terms of them being able to have a couple years added on to their NFL career. That's not what makes us excited. What makes us excited is this wide receiver coming in at such a young age. If you look at historical hit rates, definitely improves his chance to be that elite level player, and it just makes sense. And that's because if you are a good enough wide receiver to be able to go to the NFL level at 20 years old, and you don't have to continue to develop in college over the next 2 years. I mean, you're going to be able to develop in the NFL on top of where you're already at. So that just makes you so much more appealing than an older wide receiver prospect. But with Jamar Chase, he also has some prototypical size. I mean, right now he's listed as 6'1", 200 pounds. So obviously, we're going to have to double check that in on his pro day or the NFL Combine, whatever we get, because those numbers are a little skewed. And here with Jamar Chase, it's a little bit different. I mean, in 2018, really did not do much. I mean, averaged about 2 receptions and 30 yards a game. Nothing getting us excited in his true freshman year. But in 2019, with the best college offense in college football history, I mean, he was able to dominate as the wide receiver 1. I mean, he averaged 6 receptions, 127 yards, and 20 total touchdowns. Now, talking about talent that was on Alabama with Devonta Smith, we have to address the fact that Jamar Chase was playing alongside Justin Jefferson. I mean, he was playing alongside Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And Justin Jefferson literally just put up the best rookie wide receiver season of all time. And if we compare Jamar Chase's stats in 2019 at a younger age than Justin Jefferson was able to do in the same season, I mean, Jamar Chase kind of ran all over him. I mean, Jamar Chase, with less targets, less receptions, was able to average over 25 more receiving yards per game and had more touchdowns. So, I mean, unreal. I know a lot of people want to say that they would rather have Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson straight up in Dynasty right now because of what they saw in 2019. But I'll say, if any analyst right now tells you that Jamar Chase is a better Dynasty fantasy football asset than Justin Jefferson, they simply do not know what they are talking about. They simply don't understand the difference between a prospect profile coming into the NFL compared to a young stud wide receiver who has already displayed the talent and has already shown the success at the next level. They don't understand hit rates. They don't understand that character goes into this as well. So please, my one piece of advice for you, if you take away anything from this video, is if you hear an analyst say that they would prefer having Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson because Jamar Chase looks like a better wide receiver prospect in Dynasty Fantasy Football. While he may look like the better prospect, that should not be the case. You need to unfollow. You need to unsubscribe. I don't care what it is because that quote-unquote expert does not understand the probability of hit rates with these wide receiver prospects. But yeah, anyway, does not matter. Jamar Chase, fantastic wide receiver prospect. And honestly, I'm going to be looking at this, and generally, I like to lean with the guys in the metric community. I like to lean with the quote-unquote analytical guys rather than the quote-unquote film guys. But if we're putting context behind this production and what we saw with these 2 wide receivers, I'm going to lean with Devonta Smith here. I mean, I just like the gradual progression that we saw, and we can draw that clear storyline. I like that he outproduced both Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs in 2019. Now, I know this could easily be just my lizard brain telling me that 1 + 2 = 3, and that's why I'm running with this. But Devonta Smith is going to be my wide receiver 1. Obviously, landing spot and draft capital is going to play a major factor into this. And if we see Devonta Smith come in and he looks way undersized at either the NFL Combine or at his pro day, then we can take that into consideration as well. But I mean, lastly, let's focus on the landing spots where these guys can go. I mean, clearly both of these guys, in my opinion, warrant top 10 picks in the NFL draft. I think realistically, we can go all the way down to 15 and say, you know what, after this 15th pick, there's no way either wide receiver falls past. So let's focus in on the teams in the top 15 that I think would be looking at a wide receiver here. And first team off is going to be the Miami Dolphins at the 3rd overall pick. And here with Miami, honestly, I don't really like this situation. I mean, I would not love a wide receiver like either Devonta Smith or Jamar Chase falling into Miami unless they trade for Deshaun Watson. I mean, Tua was very lackluster in his rookie season, in my opinion. I know they are building things the correct way in Miami with what they were able to do in that rebuild so quickly. But I think we can clearly say that Tua was probably overvalued as a prospect coming into the NFL based on his supporting cast. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick clearly outplayed him his rookie season. The next team, though, is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals at the 5 overall spot. Now, with the Bengals, it's either going to be offensive line or it's going to be wide receiver. I truly think that they're going to do everything they can to help out their franchise quarterback in Joe Burrow. Now, I would much prefer seeing either one of these wide receivers go to Cincinnati and compete with targets with T. Higgins, because I think this team with Joe Burrow at quarterback and Zach Taylor calling plays could be ridiculous in the amount of volume of pass attempts we see year to year. And now we have the Philadelphia Eagles at the 6th overall pick. Now, y'all know I loved Jalen Hurts coming into the NFL. We have Jalen Hurts on so many of our Dynasty Superflex rosters. I would hate that landing spot. I mean, that would immediately turn Jalen Reagor into the field stretching wide receiver, and whatever wide receiver was drafted alongside him would be the Alpha X wide receiver. But, I mean, the pass attempts are going to be down if Jalen Hurts truly is their franchise quarterback. So I love Jalen Hurts in fantasy due to his rushing capabilities, but I do not like his pass catchers. I will say that right out. Then at 7 overall, you have the Detroit Lions. I think that would be a fantastic spot with just so many moving pieces there. I mean, it looks like Marvin Jones could be gone. Kenny Golladay is an unrestricted free agent as well. So I would love that landing spot. You have the New York Giants at 11, which would be a little bit neutral. I mean, there are targets to be had, but we don't know what we're having with Daniel Jones. Then you have the New England Patriots all the way down to 15. Really don't want to talk about that because I doubt we see either wide receiver last that long. But yeah, I think what we have to do here is we have to go with Devonta Smith over Jamar Chase, unless we just have serious concerns with Devonta Smith's size coming in, whether at the NFL Combine or at their pro days. But we have a long offseason ahead of us, and I will say there are a ton of draft people that are way smarter than I am. So if they are willing to come on here, if they are willing to have a discussion with me, point out facts that I maybe am not looking at this moment, I mean, I am completely willing to change my mind a month from now. But where we stand right now, way too early, we are going to be having Devonta Smith as our rookie wide receiver 1. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. As always, if y'all did, go down there, drop that like, leave that comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And yeah, that's it. I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow.